All opinions expressed on any program are those of the producer and or persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of DCTV. All producers and guests appearing on programs provide information and opinions based on information they consider to be reliable. DCTV does not affirm the completeness and accuracy. All DCTV members agree to adhere to DCTV's statement of compliance and are participants in a community medium forum where they're exercising their freedom of speech.
Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Hudis, in this DCTV series about the network of global corporate control. Today's segment is live and is about hidden reality, with a focus on the United States military and Constitution. Thanks to DCTV, to Carmen Stanley, project director, and also today she's studio director, and Cruce Starnes, audio and prompter. Let us start out with a clip from our 8th show about the heart and soul of the United States military. 4 months after this segment about General MacArthur's testimony, a United States troop sent me an email saying that he was on the front line and that we have 70% of the United States military on our side. Have no way of stopping us. I also wanted to leave you with another thought, and that is it's very important what's going to actually happen with the United States military. That's one of the indicators that you have to be looking at. Is the U.S. military going to do what's necessary to defend the United States, or are they simply a tool of the network of global corporate control? General Douglas MacArthur addressed the Massachusetts State Legislature in Boston in 1951. This is what he said: "I find in existence a new and heretofore unknown and dangerous concept that the members of our armed forces owe primary allegiance and loyalty to those who temporarily exercise the authority of the executive branch of government, rather than the country and its constitution, which they are sworn to defend. No proposition could be more dangerous. None could cast a greater doubt upon the integrity of the armed services, for its application would at once convert them from their traditional and constitutional role as the instrument for the defense of the Republic into something partaking of the nature of a Praetorian Guard, owing its allegiance to the political master of the hour." So we're going to see where the U.S. military comes out. Are they there to serve the network of global corporate control, or are they there to serve the Republic? Early on the morning that I wrote the teleprompter, 7 military aircraft flew low in the sky above my house during the 15 minutes I went out to walk the dog. I want to remind you of the November 18, 2017 show of force by a Marine Expeditionary Unit at the CIA's branch office in Langley, Virginia. I also want to remind you of the CIA's attempt to bribe me with 1 million shares of CMKM. The CIA thought I was going to enrich them with CMKM. A couple of days ago, a retweet showing that attempted bribe landed in my social media. It was from Germany. Their Twitter handle means "please, one more time," and you can see that in the teleprompter. CMKX is not getting funded from the Global Debt Facility. I'm the lawyer for the Global Debt Facility, and I vote the United States shares
for the Board of Governors who administer the global debt facility until the United States Constitution of 1789 goes back into effect. Ever since that attempted bribe, we have been on a Nantucket sleigh ride with the banking cartel harpooned. And I had tweeted, the banking cartel's CIA is mortally harpooned. Now let's try to answer a question from over East Taekwon. Karen, why are some people blind to the proof you provided about the nuke off the coast of Charleston, South Carolina in 2013? I was told by someone that it was fake news, but I don't believe it because of the information you provided. Keep up the great work. And my answer to Ty's question, the reason that some people are blind is because of the mind control technology that we've mentioned in earlier shows. It's as if about 80% of the people who are susceptible to low-frequency electromagnetic signals, they're also called directed energy weaponry. It's as if they're hypnotized. I'm the first to admit that there are many people who are totally convinced by propaganda from the media and the mind control apparatus that keeps these dupes from seeing clearly what's going on in front of their very eyes. I'm surrounded by family members who are victims of mind control, and I know very well how threatening that reality is for these victims. The only way to function during this transition is to love the victims of scalar weapons. And someone in my Twitter account named Audrey answered my statement, and he said, enough people know the reality. Aubrey's tweet, which you can see in the teleprompter, was, we don't need a majority, just passionate, unwavering 5%. That's us. Where do we go from here? We're working together in a coalition which you can see in the comments section in the show's archives and also in my social media. Some people have a hard time with the slow progress. We'll return to this topic shortly. That's what I'm going to speak extemporaneously about later. For the time being, I'm using the teleprompter. This helps when people want to translate from the English into their own language. Remember, we're in a process involving the entire world, where the corruption has lasted not only centuries, but millennia, ever since 9200 BC. I think it's fair to say that things are accelerating. I say this because I have to try and summarize what's happened in the 2 weeks between our shoots. One person whom I want to mention now is a prisoner. I tweeted him last week. There are 3 important points. One has to do with what I tweeted about, why the banking cartel couldn't kick me off the internet when they tried to do this many years ago. And you can read what I wrote then, clearing the corruption from the world's money. And I also tweeted when I showed you that attempt to kick me off the internet. Dear people, this is what I tweeted when the Montgomery County Police told me that the U.S. Secret Service was trying to kick me off of the internet. You can read this document at the end. Why wasn't I kicked off the internet? I believe it's because I have a job to do, and I'm given the opportunity to do it. My job is to work with everyone to clear the corruption from the world's money. I've continued to use the internet to convince people that we're taking back our world from the corrupt banking cartel. For those who haven't heard me before, we includes the world's military powers, minus the brass. I'm allowed to speak for the coalition that's taking back our world because I'm the lawyer who represents the world's wealth that was deposited in a trust at the World Bank and International Monetary Fund at the end of World War II. Last month, I received a very detailed 5-page handwritten letter that went on at some length, asking me to send them more information. It was from someone in prison. This person was very confused and asked me about an unproven theory which I have not mentioned for 5 years. Some people refuse to take me seriously because the CIA is now publishing 5-year-old interviews where I mentioned this theory, as if they're recent interviews. I mailed the letter back to the prisoner saying that I had no time to deal with their request because I was working full-time representing the world's people and cleaning up the corruption in the world's money. The letter wasn't delivered. It came back to me because I left off the prisoner's DL number. That's an ID number for people in jail. I had saved their envelope with their DL number, and so I mailed back the letter to the prisoner along with the letter that I tweeted. When you get a second chance like this, it's important to take it. At the time, I thought that the prisoner was trying to discredit me. Now I think they were simply confused. The second point I want to make is about prisons. I made this point earlier about the bankers using prisons to enslave people and make money from them. Private prisons threaten to sue states unless they get more inmates for free labor. Under the global currency reset, the people are going to put the 1789 Constitution back into effect and end martial law using Article 5 of the Constitution. And then I was reading this from an old tweet where you may remember the Hammonds. They were sentenced to jail for refusing to sign over their cattle ranch to the network of global corporate control. And I'm saying that their sentence is going to be commuted as soon as we have anything to say about it. Other people who didn't harm anyone and were falsely imprisoned in private jails, which are nothing more than a modern-day slavery system, they should also expect to get their freedom restored. The third point is how it's necessary to focus on getting rid of the corruption in the world's money. We'll talk without the teleprompter on this point shortly. We're going to continue to focus on getting rid of the corruption in the world's money in next week's show. I have also dealt with this topic in my comments at the end of the teleprompter. There are people who want to grab the podium now. Some of them want to keep us from the topic about how we're going to give priority to getting rid of the corruption in the world's money. These are distractions. There are other people who think their own opinion counts more than everybody else's. I'm trying very hard to serve as a moderator and to learn from everybody else. That's my job. And now I'm going to speak extemporaneously. And you'll see in the comments to a fellow named, I'm looking for his name, yes, Gig Mertz. That goes on for about 3 pages. He had about 4 or 5 comments to my tweets because he had also asked the question, what's our timetable? And that's fair enough. But in his question, he made it seem like we're not going to be replacing the fake paper currency from the central banks with currency that contains gold. And of course, that would be a big mistake because it's the fact that the money is on what they call a gold standard and doesn't have gold, that the bankers were able to create the money with corruption. And just by printing paper money, they could just bribe anybody. That's how we've ended up with all this corruption for the millennia, since 9200 BC. So That was one of the reasons that I ended up blocking Gil, because he was just going on and on. He had about 7 or 8 tweets, and that clutters my account. I'm trying to get responses from everybody in the entire world, and people get bored, and I don't want them to be bored. I want them to focus on getting rid of the corruption in the world's money. But so what I ended up saying to this Gil Mertz was, you don't have to tweet your response to me. You can send me an email. And then I told him that he should use either the comment section when I upload the videos on YouTube. He could make a comment on one of the comment pages, or I said he could make a response by using my website. Well, yesterday my website went down. The Banking Cartel hacked into my website. So I hired somebody, and I'm going to try to get the website up and running shortly, because I do want to hear from you. Because what the point was that I made to Gil is that we're actually in the global currency reset. We're dealing with all of humanity. And of course, since the governments are all corrupt, they've been replaced secretly by corporations, and that's what happened in the United States ever since 1861 during the Civil War. And then in 1871, the bankers went ahead and issued a second secret constitution. And if you look in the Securities and Exchange Commission, that's the SEC, you can see where the governments, including the provinces, are listed on the stock market as corporations. So we've got to get rid of these fake governments, and we've got to reconstitute our governments. And when I say we, I'm talking about all the people in the individual countries. And they will do this by working from the grassroots up and having their local communities issue local currencies. And that's going to obviously take a long time. And in the interim, we're in something called interregnum. That means we're between legal governments, and we've got the military forces of the world keeping peace for us. And anybody who thinks that this is wrong just needs to use a little bit of logic. If I'm saying this and the military is not denying it, then that might actually be the case. And one of the clips that you're going to see next week is you're going to see a clip that showed how the seismograph, the official seismographs recording earthquakes, those were taken offline in 2013 when that nuke went off the coast of Charleston. So there are all kinds of things that you just can't complain, including the Twin Towers. And there are so many things that you can't explain about what I'm doing. For example, when I write minutes of the meeting of the World Bank and IMF, and I send them to all the embassies, you can see that I've sent them. And not a single embassy says those are not the real minutes, because they actually are the real minutes. The minutes that are being circulated as if they're real minutes, they're from the fake governments. And the World Bank was set up, and the IMF, they were set up to manage the world's wealth. So we can have fake governments stealing our wealth, and they haven't. That wealth belongs to everybody, and that's what we're going to use to clean up the currencies. Now, let me mention some of the other things that I wanted to tell you about, in addition to the question about timetable, and this is very important. People want to know how long this is going to take. And the point is, everybody can see whether there's progress or not. Some people like to say there's no progress. But I think if you're honest and you look and you see what it is that we're talking about and how we're talking about things and how many people are convinced, you can't tell this by the number of views on the internet, because in case you haven't figured it out, the internet is not free. They like to claim it's free, but no, it's really not. It's captive. There is a certain amount of liberty, and that's why I'm able to reach out to you. And that's also one of the mysteries. Why is it that I'm allowed to get through to you? I can't explain it either. I do know that when I experience things, I'm always trying to see what's actually going on, and I'm kind of intrepid, and so far so good. There are things that slow me down, and there are things that I can't account for, like the time that somebody ran a red light and I just stopped and didn't go into the intersection, and I can't say why I stopped. But anyway, I also want to tell you about a conversation that I had with Jacek Kugler, who's the political scientist who developed this very accurate power transition model in the National War College. This was just before he gave it to me in 2004. And he said, this shows, Karen, that we've got to really work hard to prevent World War III from breaking out in the Middle East. The Middle East is a hot spot. It was deliberately orchestrated that way so that everybody would have a very difficult time resolving that problem. And I'm not going to pretend that I can resolve that problem. This is going to be something that's going to happen over a long time, and we're going to have to work very, very hard because it's one of the biggest problems that there is, and it's going to be resolved when the countries themselves have decentralized and we've cleaned up the corrupt money system. So we don't have to try to resolve things that are very, very difficult. What we do have to do is we have to sequence, because all of the very difficult problems, including the Middle East, are not going to be able to be resolved so long as we have this terrible corruption in our monetary system. And once we start learning how to work together, and another problem that we have, of course, is that our information is really not very good. Our history has been falsified. We know that from the Control3 project in the Moscow State University. And just because a lot of theories are very widely held, including science, because we've found out that there are many things that have been deliberately suppressed. So all of this hidden knowledge is going to come out during the global currency reset. It may not come out immediately. It probably won't. But the whole point is that we do have to sequence, and as we sequence and as this corruption gets rolled back, and it's not going to be easy, I have no illusion that it's going to happen very quickly, because we've got this mind control apparatus, which means that only maybe 20% of the people are actually able to understand what's going on. I've experimented. When I went to the dog park one day, I was talking to various people, and there was one fellow that he literally couldn't hear me. They are hypnotized. And if you're one of the lucky people, and probably the people that are watching this show are less sensitive, but everybody in some way has to learn how to work their way loose from the mind control. And I can give you an example from my private life of something that I thought one of my family members had said. And when I really thought about it, it wasn't logical. And yet I was convinced that that's what they had said. Because when these theories, or whatever they are actually in your mind, and that happens because of the way people think. We're all interconnected, and the way we process our thoughts is in something called the collective unconscious. And that's one of the reasons why I'm also convinced that we're going to be fine, because if we're all interconnected And there's a critical mass of people that understands what reality is. That means we've done enough work that it's really, it's a one-way street. It's irreversible, because people that can follow the logic, they can, for example, follow the logic that there was a nuclear device detonated off the coast of Charleston in 2013. And there are enough people in the United States military. You can see clips where the people who were in command of the security for the nuclear part of the military were fired up, about 150 of them, right after that bomb went off. So if you can see that kind of proof, and that logic is convincing you, then you can reach out to other people and try to convince them that things just don't fit. And there are so many things that just don't fit. Like, I think there's about 50% of the people in the United States that understand that what happened in 2001 with the Twin Towers was not anything, the explanation that there were planes that flew into the Twin Towers, that just doesn't hold up. There was a third building which collapsed that had no plane involved with it. How can you explain that? So when you're able to use logic, and when you talk to people, you can start convincing them. It's very difficult from the internet, from what I'm doing, to convince people. You really do need to be having an extended conversation. And that's what's going to happen during the global currency reset. The people that are able to function and reason are going to have the opportunity to try to convince other people using logic. And we're going to end up in the existing reality, because what you're hearing from me, that is reality, even though it flies in the face of what the accepted logic is. And if you take the trouble to look at the website for the Moscow State University, Chronologia, and you see what the difference is between the history that we've been taught in school and actual history, and they've done a meticulous job of showing what the proof is. They're mathematicians, and they use statistics and a lot of other things. When you see the difference between what the actual history is and what we've been told, it's just mind-boggling. And so I don't know how quickly it's going to take for people to understand that we've been lied to systematically in just about every realm. That's hard to accept. But one of the reasons that I do accept it is because I was sitting in a place what my job was as a lawyer to make sure that the truth was told, and I could see that the truth was being covered up and that the board was covering things up. And I reached out to some of the people that were working in the various countries. And so we all saw that there was a very corrupt regime, and it was my job to get rid of that corruption. Thank you for listening to another segment in this series on the network of global corporate control. Team Humanity is working together to wind down the banking cartel that has caused so much misery and corruption. The people who don't think there is any progress ought to try and imagine how this segment is coming across to the banking cartel.